One thing I really like about Hoyoung is the fact that none of their skills throughout every single job 1st through 5th, and soon to be 6th, are useless or taper off and become less worth using over the others. So let's start there, all the way from 1st job. Here, you got your typical thief flash jump that lets you use it twice in the air and resets when you land back on the ground, your main mobbing skill that you can use while jumping, some passives that give you extra speed and avoidability, and one passive for your talisman skills that works right from the first one you get, Evil Ceiling Gourd. Once your talisman circle gauge is full, you can suck up a bunch of enemies. Click again to spit them all out. It doesn't suck up bosses or way higher level enemies 11 levels or higher, but it still does the damage and even extra boss damage. Lastly, you should really unlock Nimbus Cloud, your best movement skill from doing the starting questline. Most classes nowadays have to sit through these up to level 30 or 2nd job-ish anyways, so bear with it. Skip through the dialogue as fast as you can if you find it boring, but 100% you should do it as this skill makes life so much easier once you get it. It cancels all momentum, can go in any direction you want, and can be linked with your flash jumps in any order you please. For 2nd job, you get a passive that makes your glide last longer and go a little bit faster. Your typical weapon attack speed booster skill you'll see on most classes if they aren't passives nowadays. Some more passives for crit rate and damage, flat luck, and weapon mastery, and one for clone attacks. I'll get back to that in a second. The main attacking skill you'll get at 2nd job is Ground Shattering Wave, which attacks straight forward a pretty good distance and is your main attack you'll be using in bossing way later on when you start to do bosses. You may have also noticed when you level this one up, another skill with a similar name levels alongside it, with additional text in parentheses that says clone/true. All these skills are activated by pressing both the same attack and the direction your clone on the said attack goes in. For Wave, this is a basic one that just sends you forward. It can also go to the edge of any platform. Back to that other passive, Out of Sight. Anytime you use certain skills, you'll go into Dark Sight and avoid most attacks for a couple of seconds. If you use another attack, it'll take you out of it, but you can use this as often as you want, and it's pretty useful for dodging a lot of boss mechanics. 2nd job is also when you get your most important buff, Clone. It costs a full circle of talisman energy, and every attack with a 1.5 second cooldown in between, it spawns clones around the map and attacks enemies alongside you. This is Hoyoung's equivalent to Shadow Partner, and takes a little getting used to, mainly because if you have your skill effect transparency way up, sometimes like me, you'll think sometimes someone is in your map KSing you. KSing means kill stealing. I promise it's not just you, it's just you. Sometimes it still gets me too when I have my skill transparency cranked up. Just remember, if you see their name below their character, then you can panic. Moving on. 3rd job, you get passives for extra damage from your previous job skills, extra health, knockback resistance and damage reduction, status resistance and restoring a little bit of HP and MP with colors on your talisman. Don't worry about this. And a bunch of attack, crit rate, crit, boss damage, and IED. That's all in one skill. Your main attack you get here is Iron Fangale, which has a hitbox so massive that it's just a pure mystery to me even now. It hits just about everything in its path and more. This is a really good skill if you wanted more comfortable Hoyo grinding in smaller maps. Gale's clone/true skill sends you in an arc forward and bounces on enemies if there's any left at the location of impact. I'll also mention it's a skill that sends you into the air no matter what, so all aerial attacks from later levels work immediately off it, and also it's a quick easy way to jump when you're under the weakness debuff. Your other attack at 3rd, Stone Tremor, has a short cooldown and can only be used on the ground, but counts as a true teleport with its clone/true skill. This is useful for getting past things like Lotus Lasers. 3rd job is also where you get your first summon, Ghost Flame. It costs talisman energy, flies around the map wherever it wants, hits in a pretty big AoE around it, and it does pretty good damage. You also get another energy gauge, this time for scroll skills. This charges up with any attacks, and also when using talisman energy skills like Gourd, Clones, or Ghost. The first scroll skill you get is Degeneration, which does a nice chunk of AoE damage. AoE means area of effect, if you didn't know that. Used on normal enemies, it transforms them into a whole bunch of different creatures. That's just a visual effect, that doesn't really do anything. Used on bosses, it does 20% extra damage, and for everything, it reduces their defense by 20% for a whole minute. This skill is mostly whatever for grinding. If you have the extra scroll energy to use it, go for it, but otherwise, once you hit 4th job, you're better off just saving it for those skills in that rank instead. It is nice on bosses though. Fourth job has some more passives that boost your overall stats as usual. Nothing too exciting or new here. More base stats, more weapon mastery, more previous job skill damage. There's also the Maple Warrior skill that all other classes in the game get, but with a Bunny Goddess for Anima race classes. You also get a standard Hero's Will skill that cleanses debuffs and makes you immune to debuffs for a few seconds. Nothing too exciting there either. Onto the actual skills, starting with Gold Banded Cudgel. This skill has a huge hitbox front and behind, hits a ton of times, and is just always good to use no matter what you're fighting. It has an 11-second cooldown, and since it's so good, I'd recommend putting it on an alert, because you'll always want to use it whenever it comes off cooldown. Great skill. Next, you have 1000 Ton Stone. It can only be used in the air and has a little bleed effect, which is kinda nice as a debuff, but it's mostly whatever compared to its actual skill damage. This is my favorite skill in the entire game because it's the fastest way to travel downwards over any other class in the entire game with any of their skills, period. Nearly instantly just end up at the bottom of any ravine you want to go down. I love this skill so much. This is the skill that kept me playing Hoyoung for so long. There's also Consuming Flames, which does a big ol' flame attack upward and resets all your mobility cooldowns, both your flash jumps and glide. This can be used for some crazy airtime, chaining both flash jumps and glide into flame and back into glides and flash jump. Its Clone/True skill just sends you straight up a fair distance too, so more mobility. Your last talisman skill is Gate, which is just a little portal you can place down wherever and teleport back to at any time with a 5-second cooldown in between teleports. If you click the skill while on the gate, it'll go to your last location you teleported from. If you have energy, you can press up and the gate skill to place down a new gate wherever you want. This is another true teleport, but it's a bit trickier to use effectively. Grinding on some maps though, it works wonders. Lastly, for fourth job are 2 summons. Vortex hits in a big area, and if placed right, it can hit multiple platforms with ease. Casting it again to cancel it early can heal you a little bit too if you hit a bunch of enemies. And finally, there's butterflies. These just kinda go forward towards whatever enemies remain when you attack, with a 1-second cooldown in between each set of butterflies spawning. Very simple, pretty nice for bossing or when fighting elite monsters. I'll touch back on what hyper passives to get, but a little explanation of the hyper skills. Dream of Shangri-La is a variable iframe skill that lasts either 1 second or 20 seconds, depending on how long you hold it down for. The longer you hold, the longer its cooldown is. Minimum cooldown is 23 seconds, maximum cooldown is 200 seconds. Extremely good skill for bosses you aren't that well versed in and just want to survive on. Even better once you do learn boss mechanics and you can use it for a shorter duration and have it up more often. Taiyu Clone is a big AoE stun/bind. Not really a skill for mobbing, but it's kinda nice for bosses since it lasts 1 whole second longer than most other binds. Big whoop. Just be careful though, as you can whiff this bind if you use it when the boss isn't in range or targetable. Miracle Tonic is the best Hoyo hyper skill. It instantly charges both your energy gauges up to full, and keeps regenerating both for the next 12 seconds. 90-second cooldown, and you can get more out of it if you keep using talisman skills to charge the scroll energy even faster. Hoyoung's 5th job skills all share the same cooldown of 3 minutes, with the one exception being 3 Paths Apparition, which is half that. This skill lets you spam Cudgel when it refreshes from using your other skills that have the Clone/True counterpart, like Wave, Gale, etc. I mentioned these two because you can spam them without any cooldown. Anyways, remember when I mentioned putting Gold Banded Cudgel on alert? It's extremely nice in 5th job for 3 Paths Apparition, as it tells you every single time it comes off cooldown during the whole duration. It also has a little passive every attack with a 5-second cooldown that summons a clone that does unique attacks on a few enemies. Next, there's Clone Rampage, which summons 10 clones every 1.5 seconds for 30 seconds, with a big increase in damage over your normal clones, which it replaces for a little bit. Simple skill. Your 3rd skill at 5th job is Tiger, which is like a bigger, better Vortex, except with a 3-minute cooldown and no healing from canceling it early. It lasts a minute and just consumes an entire side of a map, or a good chunk of a boss arena. Your last 5th job skill is Wrath of Gods. Once activated, this gives you big ol' god hands and feet coming out every 12 attacks, with a 1.5 second cooldown in between for 30 seconds. Using it again does a map-wide attack that also counts as an iframe during the whole animation, and it gives you a boost to most of your other attacks for 30 seconds. However, if you don't press the skill again before those first 30 seconds are up, you don't get the big burst or the passive damage afterwards. Try to keep in mind to click it again before it goes away, or else you'll just whiff on its entire other half. It'd be nice if Nexon just let us pop it at the end if we forgot to do it ourselves, just saying. The last skill that you fully level up at level 200 through a quest line is Fiend Seal. You start these quests through the light bulb, and it requires you to fight certain bosses and do specific theme dungeons, etc. At the end of all of them, you get a passive that gives you 10% attack and 10% final damage permanently. People sometimes forget about this one, myself included when I started off, so if you wanted to be around 10% stronger, don't forget to pick up that skill at some point. Honorable mention to Shapeshift. Click it to remove your ears and tail, 10-second cooldown. Now how do I make all this much easier without just explaining every skill? Like so. You'll always want at the least Clones and Ghost Up, and Vortex if you have the energy for it, and have a good idea of where to place it. Usually you'll want to place it near an edge close to some nearby shorter platforms, like so. Also, if you carry some momentum off the edge as you're placing Vortex down, you can fall off a platform while placing it to spend less time stationary. For mobbing, you can either jump around spamming Cudgel and As You Will Fan, or spamming Iron Fangale and Cudgel. Sprinkle in some of your 5th job skills too when they're up, like Tiger wherever Vortex isn't, Clone Rampage after that, Wrath of Gods after that, you get the idea. Any order you'd like is fine. For bossing, you'll want to be using Earthwave and Cudgel whenever it comes off cooldown. If you die, you'll lose Vortex, but not Tiger. If a platform holding either of these breaks, like in Lucid, Part 2, you lose both entirely. They're just on cooldown, they're gone. If you're high up in a training map or get sent upwards by some boss and need to get back down on the ground fast, use 1000-ton stone to save a little chunk of time. You'll want to also aim for as much attack speed as you can get. Thankfully, Hoyoung is a class that caps their attack speed with just a monster part Green Pot and Speed Infusion, alongside their weapon booster skill, so they don't need attack speed inner ability. For inner ability, for the first line at Legendary tier, you'll want to aim for either passive skills +1, because the boost it provides for your 4th job passives is pretty massive, or boss damage +20, as that's still a nice chunk of damage. For the other lines, you can settle for any mix of % boss, % abnormal status, and whatever else you feel would fit best really. Flat attack is fine if you wanted a temporary settle, % drop or meso if you planned on grinding or wanted extra drop rate from bosses, buff duration is okay for things like Angelic Buster Link being longer, crit rate if yours is a bit low and you don't quite reach 100% yet, etc. For hyper passives, you'll want Empowered Harmony and Boss Rush Harmony for 10% damage and boss damage respectively for most of your attacks, Guard Breaking Clones for 25% IED on all your clones, and Hasty Ghost Flame and Hasty Vortex to decrease the intervals of your summon's attacks by 25 and 20% respectively. The others aren't just all that useful. For Link skills, try and get 2 set up for both grinding and bossing, like any class really. This is my current setup for bossing. Pause and look up the Link skills if you need to, but mainly you'll want all the damage and boss damage ones that you can get, crit damage and crit rate ones if you aren't 100% crit rate, Ark's Solace Link skill, Angelic Buster's Terms and Conditions buff, and the Mage and Thief links that stack up to level 6. The Resistance link is optional, as it just gives you longer invincibility time after you die in a boss, up to 8 seconds. But if you know bosses well enough, it's not much of a priority. I personally like it. The Jet link skill I'll probably replace with Kali or Adele's link once it's gone. Maybe Kadina's too. For grinding, you'll want your standard Mercedes, Evan, and Aran links for flat extra XP, longer rune duration, and more combo orb XP, respectively. Lara's link for extra normal monster damage, and whatever other damage links you'd be comfortable with or have. I'll make one final note for link skills that Ilium link goes up while using Iron Fangale, which is just a free 12% damage without having to move much at all. Also, the level 200 Zero Legion block is nice for all characters whenever they're available and you want to grind them out. Hoyoung's own link skill can be useful for grinding if your initial first hit is a heavy one, since that's 14% extra damage when hitting enemies with full health, as well as a little teeny tiny bit of IED. And lastly, I'll say it again, don't forget that spending Talisman energy charges Scroll energy, which speeds up getting more energy related skills out faster. It also helps when you pop Tonic because you get a fair bit more overall energy out of that. For Trinodes, you'll optimally eventually want to max them out for all 9 of your skills that have Trinodes, but I'll streamline which ones to prioritize first. First, you'll want Clones, Humanity, and either Earth or Fangale depending on if you'll be grinding or bossing more. Earth for bossing, Gale for comfier grinding. Next, Summons, Ghost and Vortex, and whichever attack you didn't get in the first Trinode. Again, either Wave or Gale. Lastly, the remaining nodes, Butterflies, Gourd, and Degeneration. You'll be spamming all of these around when you have extra energy to spend, so it's just a little bit more min-maxy. Don't worry about getting these for a while, other than maybe butterflies, since that's a pretty alright buff for bossing. Hoyoung's BA/burst is literally just popping all their buffs, summons, and skills with cooldowns, and spamming Earthwave and Cudgel via 3 Paths Apparition, and popping Wrath of Gods when that's about to expire. Slap them buttons, bind the boss, remember to pop Wrath of Gods, and you're golden. Also, don't forget about Last Resort and Angelic Buster's Link skill. Grandest Goddess Blessing is pretty nice too, since that gives damage. Now hopefully you understand this class isn't all that scary or daunting, or maybe you're still scared off by it. I tried at least compacting it down, but there's a good chance it's not your cup of tea, and that's totally fine. Not every class should be for every player. I wanted to do this guide for a while, even way before I started making videos, because almost every friend that tried Hoyoung either didn't get it or got scared off by their playstyle, or they missed out on some vital things like glide through the questline, and they didn't understand how to use certain skills fully since they didn't get explained very well and such. To their credit, it took me a while to fully learn Hoyoung myself, but I still love them and want more people to love them too. I want to thank the Hoyoung Discord for their resources on certain details, like inner abilities and properly figuring out how to do Culvert and optimize which V-Matrix skills are good for this class. They're the chillest class Discord I've ever joined, honestly. I didn't even join until sometime last year, but they've still allowed me to lurk around for as long as I have, and I was still able to learn things even when I thought I knew just about everything about this class. I still probably don't, and I'm okay with that. I hope this guide wasn't too long, and the little Made Easy section actually helped simplify Hoyoung for you, if you kept watching up to this point. I have some ideas for what guides I want to do next, but if there's something specific you want to see, let me know. I'll probably tackle the classes I'm more well-versed in myself first, before getting into other classes that I haven't touched in a while. That's all.